The thunder of hooves echoed across the Montana plains as Yancy Owens rode like the devil himself was on his tail. Blood trickled from the gash on his arm, his prized stallion Storm pushing through exhaustion as they fled from the bandits who'd ambushed them near Rattlesnake Creek. It was 1876, and the promise of gold had drawn too many desperate men to these territories, men who'd rather steal than stake their own claim. As darkness fell and Storm began to falter, Yancy spotted a flicker of light in the distance, a lone homestead standing defiant against the wilderness, his only chance for survival. Zarah Patterson wiped her hands on her apron and peered out the window of her small ranch house at the sound of an approaching rider. Ever since her father's passing 3 months ago, strangers meant trouble. She grabbed the shotgun from above the door, her finger ready on the trigger. When the horse collapsed in her yard and a bloodied man tumbled from the saddle, instinct took over. Despite her better judgment, Zarah lowered her weapon and ventured into the night. "Mister, you're bleeding all over my property," she called, keeping a safe distance. Yancy raised his head, vision blurring as he took in the silhouette of a woman holding a shotgun. "I apologize for the inconvenience, madam," he managed, attempting to rise and failing. "I'll be on my way once I can stand." "You ain't going nowhere tonight," Zarah responded, setting the shotgun aside to examine his wound. "That needs tending or you'll be dead by morning." "I ain't used to help," Yancy growled, trying again to push himself up. "Then it's about time you learned," Zarah replied firmly, gripping his good arm and helping him to his feet. "I'm not dragging your corpse off my land come sunrise." Yancy wanted to protest, but lacked the strength. His horse nickered weakly from where it had collapsed, and concern for the animal momentarily overrode his stubbornness. "My horse. I'll tend to him after I stop you from bleeding out," Zarah assured him, her voice softer now as she guided him toward the house. "Name's Zarah Patterson. This was my father's ranch." "Yancy Owens," he replied through gritted teeth as pain shot through his arm. "Obliged for the assistance." Inside the modest cabin, Zarah settled Yancy into a chair before retrieving a basin of water and clean cloths. The lamplight revealed his features clearly now, strong jawline covered in several days' worth of beard, piercing blue eyes clouded with pain, and a face weathered by years under the merciless western sun. "Those men still after you?" she asked as she cut away his bloodied sleeve. Yancy winced. "Probably gave up the chase when night fell. They got what they were after my saddlebags had a month's earnings from the mine." "You're a miner." "Sometimes. Cowhand mostly. Drove cattle for the Henderson spread until last month. Been prospecting since, with limited success." He hissed as she cleaned his wound. "You live here alone?" Zarah's hands paused briefly. "Since Pa died. My brother Robert's due back from Denver in a month or so. Been managing. Dangerous for a woman alone." Her eyes flashed. "I can handle a gun better than most men, Mr. Owens." "I don't doubt it," Yancy replied, a hint of admiration in his voice despite the pain. "But those men who jumped me, they're the worst sort." "We'll worry about them if they show," Zarah said pragmatically. "This needs stitching." Before Yancy could protest, she retrieved a needle and thread, sterilizing them in a flame. "Had to stitch up Pa and the ranch hands plenty of times. Hold still." Yancy gripped the edge of the table with his good hand as she worked, her fingers nimble and surprisingly gentle. When she finished, she bound the wound with a clean bandage. "Thank you," he managed, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. "You're welcome," she replied, gathering her supplies. "Now I'll see to your horse." You should rest," she interrupted. "I know horses, Mr. Owens." Too exhausted to argue, Yancy nodded. As Zarah headed outside, he took in his surroundings. The cabin was small but tidy, with simple furnishings that spoke of practical living. A few touches embroidered curtains. A colorful quilt on the rocking chair hinted at a woman's presence amidst the rugged frontier existence. Outside, Zarah found Yancy's stallion had managed to stand, though he was clearly exhausted. She led him to the small stable where her own mare and work horse resided, speaking softly as she removed his saddle and examined him for injuries. Finding only minor scratches, she brushed him down, provided water and feed, then returned to the house. Inside, Yancy had dozed off in the chair. Zarah debated waking him but decided against it. Instead, she carefully draped a blanket over him before retreating to her own small bedroom. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the windows. Yancy woke with a start, momentarily confused by his surroundings until the previous night's events came rushing back. His arm throbbed dully beneath the bandage. The smell of coffee and frying bacon filled the small cabin. "Thought you might sleep the morning away," Zarah commented from the stove. In the daylight, Yancy could see her clearly for the first time. She was younger than he'd initially thought, perhaps 25, with copper-colored hair tied back in a practical braid. Her eyes were a striking green, set in a face that, while not conventionally beautiful, possessed a certain strength and character that drew his attention. "Force of habit to rise with the sun," Yancy responded, stretching his stiff muscles. "How's Storm faring? Your horse is fine." Eating his share and then some. She set a plate of eggs and bacon before him. "You should eat." Yancy didn't need to be told twice. It had been days since he'd had a proper meal, and his stomach rumbled appreciatively. "I need to be moving on," he said between mouthfuls. Those men won't expect you to be holed up at a ranch," Zarah interrupted. "Besides, you're in no condition to travel far. That arm needs rest, and so does your horse." Yancy frowned. "I don't make a habit of accepting charity, Miss Patterson." "It's not charity if you work for it," she replied pragmatically. "I've got fence that needs mending, and I was due to move the cattle to the north pasture. With one man down, I could use an extra hand. You have help. A local boy, Thomas, helps with the heavier work. He's only 16, but he's strong and willing to learn." She poured more coffee into his cup. "Rest today. Tomorrow, if you're up to it, you can earn your keep." Yancy wanted to protest, but the truth was he had nowhere pressing to be, and the thought of riding out with bandits possibly still in the area wasn't appealing. Besides, there was something about this forthright woman that intrigued him. 3 days, he conceded. "I'll help for 3 days, then I'm moving on." Zarah nodded, hiding a small smile. 3 days it is. True to her word, Zarah let Yancy rest that first day, though he insisted on checking on Storm and helping with small chores around the cabin. The following morning, Thomas arrived, a gangly youth with a shock of red hair and an obvious admiration for Zarah that made Yancy smile inwardly. "This here's Mr. Owens," Zarah introduced. "He'll be helping us for a few days." Thomas eyed Yancy's bandaged arm. "What happened to you, mister?" "Disagreement with some unsavory characters," Yancy replied. "Nothing for you to worry about." The boy looked skeptical but nodded. "We fixing the north fence today, Miss Patterson. That's the plan. Can you two handle it while I prepare for moving the herd tomorrow?" "We'll manage," Yancy assured her, ignoring the twinge in his arm. He'd worked through worse in his time. The day passed in honest labor, the kind Yancy knew well. Despite his injury, he kept pace with Thomas, finding the routine of physical work familiar and oddly comforting. By sundown, they'd repaired a significant stretch of fence, and Yancy's respect for the young ranch hand had grown. The boy might be young, but he knew his business and worked without complaint. As they returned to the house, Yancy caught sight of Zarah in the garden, the setting sun catching her hair and turning it to fire. She looked up, smiled, and something shifted in Yancy's chest, a feeling he promptly ignored. Dinner that night was a lively affair, with Thomas staying to eat before heading home to his family's small holding nearby. The boy regaled them with local gossip and stories, occasionally drawing reluctant laughter from Yancy. Zarah watched this interaction with curious eyes, seeing a different side to the gruff cowboy who'd collapsed in her yard. After Thomas departed, Yancy helped Zarah clean up, working in companionable silence until she broke it. "You're good with the boy. Patient." Yancy shrugged. "He's a hard worker, deserves respect. Some men wouldn't see it that way, they just see a kid to order around." "I was that kid once," Yancy replied. "Started working cattle when I was 14 after my father died. Had my share of men who treated me like I was worthless until I proved otherwise. And your mother died when I was born." His tone wasn't self-pitying, just matter of fact. "My father did his best, but he wasn't cut out to raise a boy alone. Taught me to ride and shoot, though, which served me well enough." Zarah nodded, understanding in her eyes. "My mother passed when I was 12. Consumption. Left Pa with me and Robert to raise. He did what he could, but there were things." She trailed off, then smiled ruefully. "Let's just say I learned to sew and cook by trial and error." "You've done well for yourself," Yancy observed, gesturing to the well-maintained ranch. "This is no small operation for a woman alone." "It was Pa's dream. He came west in '55, staked this claim, built from nothing. I couldn't bear to see it fall apart after he died." She squared her shoulders. "Robert was always more interested in city life. He's in Denver now, working in a law office, coming home when he can, which isn't often. And you never thought of leaving, finding an easier life?" "This is my home," she said simply. "What about you? Ever think of settling down?" Yancy's expression closed off slightly. "Never found a reason to." The following day brought the task of moving the small herd of cattle to fresh pasture. Yancy felt in his element at last, back in the saddle despite Zarah's concerns about his wound. Storm seemed equally pleased to be working, responding to the lightest touch as they gathered the scattered animals. Watching Zarah work was a revelation. She rode with confidence, her commands to the cattle clear and effective. There was none of the hesitation Yancy might have expected from a woman doing what was traditionally men's work. Thomas, too, showed skill beyond his years, anticipating movements and responding quickly to changes. By midday, they'd successfully relocated the herd and Zarah called for a break. They settled beneath a large cottonwood tree, sharing the food she'd packed that morning. "You handle yourself well on a horse," Yancy commented. "Better than most men I've worked with." "Pa insisted both his children learn everything about running the ranch," she replied. "Said he wouldn't always be around to do the man's work. Wise man. He was stubborn too." Her expression softened with memory. "Much like someone else I recently met." Yancy chuckled, surprising himself. It had been a long time since he'd laughed easily in anyone's company. "I've been called worse." As they ate, clouds began gathering on the horizon, promising an afternoon storm. They quickened their pace, checking that the herd was settled before heading back toward the ranch house. The rain caught them halfway, a sudden deluge that had them spurring their horses to a gallop. They reached the stable just as thunder cracked overhead, dismounting quickly to get the animals inside. In the confined space, Yancy became acutely aware of Zarah's presence as they worked side by side, removing tack and rubbing down the horses. Water dripped from her hair, plastering her shirt to her form in a way that made Yancy avert his eyes, suddenly conscious of propriety. "You're bleeding again," Zarah noted, pointing to his arm where a red stain was spreading on his bandage. Too much activity too soon. It's nothing, Yancy dismissed, but Zarah was already leading him toward the house, concern etched on her features. Inside, she insisted on changing his bandage, her fingers cool against his skin as she worked. The cabin seemed smaller somehow, more intimate with rain drumming on the roof and the world outside reduced to gray shadows. "Thank you," Yancy said quietly when she finished. "Not just for this. For everything." Zarah met his gaze, something unspoken passing between them. "You're welcome, Mr. Owens." "Yancy," he corrected. "I think we're past formalities." "Yancy," she repeated, the name sounding different in her voice. For a moment, neither moved, caught in some uncharted territory between strangers and something more. Then Zarah stood, breaking the spell, and busied herself with preparing dinner. That night, as the storm raged outside, they sat before the fire, talking of small things, favorite horses they'd known, the changing seasons on the plains, books they'd read in rare moments of leisure. Yancy found himself speaking more than he had in years, drawn out by Zarah's genuine interest and thoughtful responses. "You know," she said during a lull in conversation, "you never did tell me where you were headed before you ended up here." Yancy contemplated the fire. "Nowhere in particular. I heard there might be work at the Carson Ranch up north, but nothing definite. Just wandering then, I suppose so. Never been one to stay put long." He glanced at her. "Does that strike you as aimless?" "No," she said after a moment. "Just lonely, perhaps." The observation hit closer to home than Yancy cared to admit. "There's freedom in movement. And in having somewhere to return to," she countered gently. The third day dawned clear and bright. Yancy woke early, a strange reluctance settling in his chest at the thought of leaving. He'd given his word, though 3 days, and then he'd move on. That was the agreement. He found Zarah already up, tending to the morning chores. Together, they completed the remaining tasks they'd planned, working with the efficiency of people who'd collaborated far longer than a mere few days. By afternoon, they'd accomplished more than Yancy had thought possible. "I should get ready to leave," he said as they walked back to the house, the sun beginning its westward descent. "I gave my word 3 days." Zarah stopped walking. "Is that what you want?" The directness of her question caught him off guard. "What I want hasn't factored into my decisions for a long time." "Maybe it should," she suggested, then continued toward the house, leaving Yancy to consider her words. That evening, as Yancy packed his meager belongings, a commotion outside drew their attention. Zarah reached for her shotgun, but Yancy was already at the window, peering into the gathering dusk. "It's Thomas," he reported, relief evident in his voice. But as the boy drew closer, Yancy's expression hardened. "Something's wrong." They rushed outside to meet the youth, who practically fell from his horse in his haste. "Miss Patterson, Mr. Owens, they're coming, the men who jumped you. They've been asking all over about a wounded man and a black stallion. They're headed this way." Yancy's hand went to his gun. "How many?" "4 that I saw," Thomas gasped. "Mean-looking bunch, said they had unfinished business." Zarah's face paled, but her voice remained steady. "Thomas, ride for the Hendersons' place. They're the closest neighbors with enough men to help. Go now." The boy hesitated. "But Miss Patterson, go," Yancy and Zarah said in unison. Thomas nodded reluctantly and remounted, galloping off into the growing darkness. "You should go with him," Yancy told Zarah, checking his revolver. "This is my fight. This is my ranch," she replied firmly. "I'm not abandoning it to outlaws." Knowing argument was futile, Yancy nodded. "Then we prepare. How many weapons do you have?" They worked quickly, barricading the cabin and positioning themselves strategically. As darkness fell completely, the sound of approaching riders reached their ears. Yancy positioned himself at the front window, Zarah at the side, both with clear views of the yard. 4 men rode into view, stopping a cautious distance from the house. The leader, a bearded man with a prominent scar across his cheek, called out, "We know you're in there, Owens. Come on out and maybe we won't burn this pretty little ranch to the ground." "What do they want?" Zarah whispered. "It's not about the money anymore," Yancy replied grimly. "I killed one of their men during the ambush. This is about revenge. You there in the house," the leader shouted again. "Send Owens out and the rest of you can go free." "That's generous of you, Dawson," Yancy called back, surprising Zarah with his recognition of the man. "But I seem to recall you're not known for keeping your word." The man named Dawson laughed, a harsh sound in the night. "You remember me. I'm Touched Owens." "We go back, boys," he informed his companions. "Owens here used to ride with the law in Colorado, put my brother in the ground." Zarah shot Yancy a questioning look, but he kept his eyes on the threat outside. "He drew first, as I recall," Yancy responded evenly. "Just like your friend 3 days ago." "Well, now we're going to finish what we started," Dawson snarled. "Last chance to come out peaceful like. And if I don't," in response, a shot rang out, striking the wall near the window. Yancy pulled Zarah down as more bullets followed, wood splintering around them. "Stay low," Yancy instructed, positioning himself to return fire. He managed 2 careful shots, rewarded with a cry of pain from outside. "Got one," he muttered grimly. The exchange of gunfire continued, neither side gaining a clear advantage. Yancy was careful with his ammunition, making each shot count, while the outlaws seemed content to waste bullets intimidating them. A lull fell, followed by Dawson's voice. "Getting mighty lonely out here, Owens. Maybe we'll pay a visit to your lady friend's stable. Bet those horses would fetch a fine price what's left of them after we're done." Yancy glanced at Zarah, saw the fury in her eyes. "They're trying to draw us out," he warned. "I know," she replied, "but I can't let them harm the animals." Before Yancy could stop her, she moved to the back window, aimed carefully, and fired. A howl of pain confirmed her shot had found its mark. "Damn witch!" someone yelled. "Bitch shot me. 2 down," Zarah said with grim satisfaction, reloading quickly. Yancy couldn't help but admire her courage, even as he worried for her safety. "They'll rush us now they know there are only 2 of us." As if confirming his prediction, the sound of breaking glass came from the back room, followed by the distinctive thud of something landing on the floor. "Fire bomb!" Yancy shouted, pulling Zarah toward the front of the house as flames erupted in the back bedroom. Smoke quickly filled the small cabin, making it difficult to breathe or see. "We need to get out," Zarah coughed, clutching her shotgun. "They'll be waiting for exactly that," Yancy warned, but the rapidly spreading fire left them little choice. Using the smoke as partial cover, they burst through the front door, guns ready. Gunfire erupted immediately, forcing them to dive for the meager protection of the porch supports. Yancy returned fire, downing another outlaw, but Dawson remained, sheltered behind a water trough. "You've got nowhere to run, Owens," he called, firing again and splintering wood inches from Yancy's head. The fire behind them grew more intense, the heat becoming unbearable. Zarah met Yancy's eyes, determination written across her face. Without words, they formed a plan, communicating through gestures. On Yancy's count of 3, Zarah laid down covering fire while he sprinted toward the stables. Dawson, momentarily pinned down, couldn't get a clear shot. When Yancy reached new cover, he signaled Zarah, who made her own dash to join him while he provided protection. They were halfway to the stables when Dawson realized their plan. With a roar of rage, he abandoned his shelter to give chase, firing wildly. One bullet grazed Zarah's shoulder, causing her to stumble. Yancy turned back, exposing himself to help her, and Dawson seized the opportunity. The outlaw's bullet would have found its mark if not for the thundering hooves that suddenly filled the yard. Thomas had returned with help 3 riders from the Henderson ranch, guns drawn and ready. Dawson, finding himself suddenly outnumbered, turned to flee but never made it to his horse. A single shot from Zarah's shotgun caught him squarely in the back, dropping him to the dirt. The silence that followed seemed deafening after the chaos of gunfire. Yancy helped Zarah to her feet, concern etched on his features as he examined her wound. "It's just a graze," she assured him, though pain tightened her voice. The Henderson men quickly took charge of the situation, checking that all the outlaws were accounted for, while Thomas helped Yancy and Zarah secure the horses, which were panicked by the nearby fire. Together, they organized a bucket line from the well to the burning cabin, but it quickly became clear that the structure couldn't be saved. As dawn broke over the smoldering remains of the cabin, Zarah sat on an overturned barrel, her shoulder bandaged, watching as the last embers died out. Yancy approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee made at the temporary camp they'd established in the stable. "I'm sorry about your home," he said, handing her a cup. Zarah accepted it with a nod of thanks. "It's just wood and nails, can be rebuilt." "I'll help," Yancy offered without hesitation. "It's the least I can do after bringing this trouble to your door." She studied him over her cup. "What Dawson said about you riding with the law was true," Yancy confirmed. "I was a deputy in Colorado for 3 years, gave it up after." He paused, old wounds surfacing. "After losing too many friends to men like Dawson. So you've been running ever since?" It wasn't a question, but Yancy answered anyway. "Moving on, there's a difference." "Is there?" Zarah challenged gently. "Seems to me you've been avoiding putting down roots because it's easier than risking loss again." Her perception struck uncomfortably close to the truth. Yancy remained silent, watching the sunrise paint the plains in gold and pink. "I understand, you know," Zarah continued after a moment. "After Ma died, I wanted to run too, leave everything behind, start fresh somewhere pain couldn't find me." She gestured to the land around them. "But this place, it's more than just property. It's memory and promise and future all in one." "Your future is here," Yancy acknowledged. "Mine's always been the next horizon." "It doesn't have to be," she said simply, her green eyes meeting his with an openness that made his heart beat faster. Before Yancy could respond, one of the Henderson men approached, hat in hand. "Miss Patterson, we're ready to head back. You're welcome to come stay at our place until you can rebuild." "Thank you, Mr. Henderson, but I'll be fine here. The stable is sound, and I have supplies in the storage shed." "As you wish, madam. We'll come back tomorrow to help clear the debris." As the Henderson men departed, Thomas lingering until assured he wasn't needed further, Yancy and Zarah found themselves alone once more. The reality of what had happened and what might have happened settled between them. "You could have died because of me," Yancy said quietly. "Or lived because of you," Zarah countered. "Life's full of those balances." Yancy smiled despite himself. "You've a philosopher's heart, Zarah Patterson." "Just practical," she replied, standing. "Now, are you going to help me salvage what we can, or are you still planning on riding out today?" The question hung in the air, weighted with meaning beyond the simple words. Yancy looked at the ruined cabin, at the land stretching around them, and finally at Zarah, strong, fearless Zarah, who had faced down outlaws to protect what was hers. "I think," he said slowly, "my plans might need reconsideration." The days that followed took on a rhythm of their own. With help from neighbors, they cleared the burned ruins and began the process of rebuilding. Yancy threw himself into the work, his skill with tools proving as capable as his horsemanship. They set up temporary living quarters in the stable, maintaining a careful propriety that nevertheless became more difficult as their awareness of each other grew. Evenings found them planning the new cabin, heads bent together over rough sketches, fingers occasionally brushing in ways that sent unexpected warmth through both. Yancy suggested improvements to the original design, better defensive positions, stronger doors, while Zarah insisted on practical comforts that made a house a home. "It's bigger than what you had before," Yancy observed one night as they reviewed their plans by lantern light. "Well, I'm thinking ahead," Zarah replied, not meeting his eyes. "For the future." The implications of her words hung between them, unaddressed but increasingly harder to ignore. As weeks passed, the skeleton of the new cabin rose against the sky. Yancy found himself watching Zarah when she wasn't looking, the way sunlight caught in her hair, the determined set of her jaw when faced with a challenge, the rare but transformative smile that appeared when something pleased her. He noticed, too, how she sought his opinion, valued his input, and gradually came to rely on his presence in ways that went beyond practical assistance. For his part, Yancy felt a growing connection to this place and the woman who embodied its spirit. He'd meant to stay only until the cabin was rebuilt, but as each day passed, the thought of leaving became more difficult to contemplate. He found reasons to delay additional work needed, concerns about possible return of Dawson's associates, the approaching winter that would make travel difficult. The truth, though unspoken, was simpler. He no longer wanted to leave. The turning point came unexpectedly, on a day like any other. They were raising a roof beam together, the physical labor requiring perfect coordination between them. When the heavy timber was finally secured in place, they stood back to admire their work, breathless and satisfied. Zarah looked up at the frame of what would soon be her new home, and Yancy looked at her. "It's going to be beautiful," she said, pride evident in her voice. "Yes," Yancy agreed, though he wasn't looking at the cabin. "It is." Zarah turned, caught the direction of his gaze, and held it. The moment stretched between them, charged with everything they hadn't said. "Yancy," she began, but whatever she meant to say was interrupted by the arrival of Thomas, bringing supplies from town. That evening, as they sat by the campfire outside their temporary shelter, the interruption weighed on Yancy's mind. Something had shifted between them, something that demanded acknowledgement. He watched Zarah as she mended a shirt, her expression contemplative in the firelight. "I got a letter from Robert today," she said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Thomas brought it from town. He's staying in Denver for good, gotten himself engaged to a banker's daughter." "How do you feel about that?" She considered the question. "Happy for him. Relieved in a way. I've been worried he might feel obligated to come back and take over the ranch. Now I know he's found his own path." "And you, is this still your path?" Zarah set aside her sewing, meeting his gaze directly. "This ranch is my home, my legacy, but I've learned something these past weeks." She paused, seeming to gather courage. "A home is more than land and buildings. It's the people you share it with." The implication was clear, an opening Yancy didn't want to ignore. "Zarah, I'm not the settling type, or at least I never thought I was. And now," her voice was steady, but he could see the vulnerability beneath her composure, "now I'm not so sure." He moved closer, taking her hand in his. "I've spent years moving on, never looking back, but here with you, for the first time I'm thinking about staying put." Hope flickered in her eyes. "Is that what you want?" "What I want," Yancy said carefully, "is to build something that lasts. Something true." He gestured to the half-finished cabin. "Not just walls and a roof, but a life with you if you'll have me." For a moment, Zarah was silent, and Yancy feared he'd misread everything. Then she smiled, a slow, radiant expression that transformed her face. "I reckon I might be persuaded," she replied, her attempt at casualness belied by the emotion in her voice. "Though you should know, I'm not an easy woman to live with. I'm stubborn, set in my ways." Yancy cut off her words with a kiss, gentle but purposeful. When they parted, both slightly breathless, he smiled. "I noticed the stubborn part. It's one of the things I admire about you." Their relationship deepened as autumn gave way to winter. The cabin was completed just before the first snow, a sturdy structure that combined Yancy's practical defense measures with Zarah's insistence on comforts. They married in a simple ceremony at the nearby town of Whiteridge, attended by neighbors who had come to accept the former drifter as part of their community. Winter passed in a cocoon of domestic contentment that Yancy had never imagined possible for himself. He discovered joy in the simple rhythms of shared life: mornings waking beside Zarah, evenings planning the spring planting, nights learning the contours of each other's bodies and hearts. The man who had never needed help, never stayed in one place long enough to form attachments, found himself utterly and willingly bound to this woman and the life they were creating together. Spring brought new beginnings. The cattle herd increased with healthy calves. The vegetable garden Zarah planted flourished, and most precious of all, the news that their family would grow by winter's return. "Are you happy?" Zarah asked one evening as they sat on the porch of their cabin, watching the sunset paint the plains in brilliant hues. Her hand rested on the slight swell of her stomach, a protective gesture that filled Yancy with wonder. He covered her hand with his, feeling the promise of their future beneath his palm. "Happier than I ever thought possible. You taught me that, you know." "Taught you what?" "That accepting help isn't weakness. That putting down roots doesn't mean giving up freedom. That loving someone," his voice roughened with emotion, "loving you is the bravest thing I've ever done." Zarah leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. "Not bad for a stubborn cowboy who wasn't used to help." Yancy laughed, drawing her closer. "And a stubborn woman who decided to teach him otherwise." The years that followed brought challenges, as all years do, but they faced them together. Their daughter, Elizabeth, was born during a December blizzard, with Yancy delivering her himself when the doctor couldn't reach them through the snow. 2 years later, their son Daniel joined the family, bearing his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit. The ranch prospered under their joint stewardship, expanding as they acquired neighboring land when old settlers moved on. Yancy's past as a lawman occasionally proved useful as the territory grew and changed, and more than once he was called upon to help maintain order in the growing community. But always he returned to the ranch, to the home and family that had transformed a wanderer into a man with purpose. On the 10th anniversary of the night Yancy had stumbled, wounded, into Zarah's yard, they stood together on the porch of their home, larger now, but still built on the foundation they had created together. Their children played in the yard, Elizabeth teaching her younger brother to lasso a practice post with determined instruction that echoed her mother's practical nature. "You ever regret it?" Zarah asked, watching Yancy's gaze follow their children with obvious pride. "Settling down with me instead of continuing your wandering ways." Yancy turned to her, taking in the woman who had become the center of his world. Time had added subtle lines around her eyes, threads of silver in her copper hair, but to him, she was more beautiful than ever, a beauty born of shared struggles overcome, joys celebrated, and a love that had only deepened with passing years. "Not for a single moment," he assured her, drawing her into his arms. "You were right, all those years ago. It was about time I learned to accept help, to trust someone else with my life and heart." He kissed her softly, still marveling that such happiness could be his. "Best lesson I ever learned." Zarah smiled against his lips, her arms tightening around him. "And here I thought I was the stubborn one." "Oh, you are," Yancy laughed, holding her close as they watched their children, their cattle grazing on the hills beyond, the life they'd built together spreading in all directions. "But so am I. Guess that's why we fit." As twilight settled over their ranch, they remained on the porch, content in the knowledge that what they'd found together, a love born of courage, forged through hardship, and sustained by mutual respect, was rarer and more precious than any gold a wandering prospector might hope to find. For Yancy Owens, the horizon was no longer a destination to chase, but the boundary of the home and life he'd created with the woman who had taught him the true meaning of strength, not self-reliance, but the courage to depend on another, to love without reservation, and to build a future neither could have imagined alone.